This is Darth Matthew, host of the Star Wars Generations and Superhero Ethics podcast, and I find your lack of membership disturbing. You can free yourself from the ads of those rebel scum by going to theethicalpanda.com and clicking join for $5 a month, $55 a year. No more ads, only the episodes, just as the Emperor intended.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Maul Shadow Lord. Nope. This is still Star Wars Generations podcast, but we've been really focused on Maul Shadow Lord, and now all of it is done. And if you don't recognize that laugh by now, what have you been doing with your lives? That is the laugh of Mr. Pete Wright, Star Wars expert extraordinaire, Marvel expert extraordinaire, podcasting extraordinaire, and mentor to me in that regard. I say that so he doesn't fire me. Pete, how are we doing today?
Oh boy, was this a great way to wrap up this series?
It really was.
This season,
really was.
I should say. Wow.
AK Ahab, who's been with us on a couple of other episodes, is hopefully going to join us, but I know their life can get a little bit crazy with school and stuff like that, so they may jump in late. They may not be able to make it. But for now, Pete, let's kind of just talk about the heavy-breathing metallic elephant in the room. Darth Vader showed up, and I think it made it work.
Did you, I mean, I went back to our previous conversations, and I think every single dark corner was filled with Palpatine, right? I did not see Darth Vader showing up.
Yeah.
And the fact that he got a reveal, he got I would say, like, again, when we talk about how great it is when they play the tropes well, he got a Darth Vader reveal. He got the deep breathing in the mist with the red lightsaber lighting up the perfect angles on the helmet. It just was artistically beautiful and a surprise. And I wonder if I should have been surprised. I did not see it coming. I don't know.
I think there's a couple things there. I think part of it is that we know that from Maul, this is all about Sidious. This is all about him wanting to take down Sidious, about him having this kind of like lost father figure feeling towards Sidious who betrayed him and threw him aside. And so I think we've been building to that. And so I think in some ways there was a sense of it being kind of a red herring so that we could bring in Vader. I think the other reason though, and maybe other people weren't worried about it the way I wasn't even letting myself think about Vader because in my mind, the only person who can properly voice Darth Vader, James Earl Jones, has passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know that they have James Earl Jones voluntarily, with his consent, I'm sure with an awful lot of money as well, went in and recorded his voice in such a way that they can AI give us almost, Darth Vader saying almost anything in what will sound like Darth Vader's James Earl Jones's voice. I very much don't want that. And so when I saw Vader, I was nervous about this. And as Aaron and I talked about a couple of days ago, the decision to have Vader not say a word because he doesn't need to was perfect.
It was perfect. I can't help after the episode 10 close to credits, I can't help but wonder, it seems very likely that Vader will return in season 2, which is in production right now. Yeah. And if he does return, that casting decision will matter a lot. I mean, they didn't even cast him vocally in this season. Obviously, they never planned on having lines for this Vader. And I thought it worked well because I found myself filling them in my head. Yeah. I was filling them in with James Earl Jones' voice. I thought it was pretty stunning.
Yeah.
All things being equal.
Well, especially because the role he's playing, they refer to him as like they don't even know if they don't know what he is. They don't know if he's a man. Yeah. They don't know what's happening.
You're no inquisitor. What are you?
Yeah, I thought it was so well done, and especially because we are seeing him entirely from the perspective of Maul and the other characters. And so, they wouldn't have any idea. And to me, this is in some ways, by the time of A New Hope, I think Vader is pretty publicly known as Palpatine's the Emperor's enforcer. At this point, though, we're still supposed to have the shiny, happy emperor. We are still in the I just want to make the trains run on time kind of thing, not the I'm going to, invade Abyssinia kind of time of Mussolini. We are just trying to be happy and a good empire. And so I can understand if they don't want people to know, oh, yeah, this guy who looks an awful lot like that nightmare thing that we've talked about for 1,000 years, the Sith, he's working for the emperor, but don't worry, it's fine.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know if part of that is that the secret, but I just thought everything about it of the just terror that he instilled was, and having it start by Rook run into the mists, and it's a cliche. The moment she runs into those mists that something is going to kill her. But I thought you're right. They did a very good job of like, she dies of something, but it could be some monster creature. It could be Vader. It could be Palpatine. It could be something else. And then the reveal of Vader is just perfectly done.
Well, we also get the horror drag, right?
Yep.
I do love that she's force dragged by her ankles on the ground. I thought that was a really nice touch. Impending threat. Use of sound was extraordinary. The blasters and the saber, the lightsaber firing up, I think was really solid. Interesting choreography of Vader, because, I mean, the last time we saw, well, let's see, chronologically, one of the things that's so beautiful about this is that we actually have Palpatine's Thug 1 fighting Palpatine's Thug 2, right? Like putting these two characters together and making Maul, who was a preeminent thug in just straight up, ability, make him look small next to Vader. Now, Vader, the last time we saw Vader in the form of Anakin, he was a very able lightsaber fighter. And here, I think they made some really conscious choices around animating Vader as closer to a New Hope Vader. He was a blunt force trauma guy. He just whacks and whacks and whacks. There was none of the Anakin artistry, none of the Inquisitor artistry, none of the Maul artistry. And Vader still dominates because of sheer sort of presence of will. I thought that was a really interesting choice. Now you've watched him a couple of times. Did that strike you at all?
It definitely did. Aaron had made the point that it did seem like the fighting style was different and that he was a little bit more technical when fighting Maul because that was more of a challenge. And I think there's definitely some truth to that. But I think you're right, especially because I was rewatching it. It just seemed like there's none of the parkour that Anakin used to do. There's none of the bouncing around. And I'm getting ready to play a game of Dungeons and Dragons. This metaphor will some of our folks may understand it, but hopefully everyone can sort of get what I'm talking about. In Dungeons and Dragons, you can attack with a strength-based weapon where you roll your strength, your strength modifier, or you can have a dexterity-based attack where it's much more finesse. And it felt like Anakin had a dexterity-based attack. Vader 100% has a strength-based attack.
Absolutely. That's absolutely what I got out of it, too.
Yeah. AK has joined us. Welcome. AK, we're kind of starting at the back and talking about that. We talked about the Vader reveal and how he worked in the show. What was your thought when you first saw Vader, and how did you feel his presence wound up working out?
Yeah, I think his presence ended up working out better than I thought it was going to work out. I mean, I was hyped to see him. It's hard not to be hyped to see him, as much as I was kind of hoping the story wasn't going to veer in that direction. I think they did a good job not giving us like too much, I think Vader as this just really scary, kind of quiet figure that shows up and poses a problem is like the original Vader. He doesn't have as much personality in the original trilogy that I think they've given him in some of the later works, and I liked seeing that version of Vader again.
Well, certainly he doesn't in A New Hope. And I've always kind of got the idea that part of what happens is he has this moment with Luke and he connects and realizes like, Skywalker, is this my offspring? And that's what in Empire and the others kind of sets him off. But you're right, in A New Hope, he is just the attack dog of his master. And you brought up, Pete, that there's this kind of wonderful synergy of, Sidious's two different enforcers going at it. And I'm glad that none of this was from Vader's perspective. I think it's very much from Maul's and from Dockie's and from Devan's. And I like that we sort of get this is where, because, by the time of Rebels and Maul's last episode, he knows that Vader is Anakin. And he tells Obi-Wan that. And Obi-Wan already knew that, but he tells others that. And I love that we get the sense that this is where he first starts to figure it out. What I don't have any idea of, and I didn't want it answered now, but if we get Vader in season 2, I do want to know at some point, does Vader connect the person he's fighting now to the person who made him duck as a little boy on Tatooine and probably was the first person to put real fear into him, and then also the person who killed Qui-Gon, who was the guy who in his mind, was responsible for getting him out of slavery and getting him into the Jedi. Like, we know that Vader tries to just block out most of his memories of Anakin, so I don't know if he makes that connection at all. But this is so soon after he becomes Vader. The conflict is still very much in him from what we know about the comics and some books and stuff. I would love to know more from his perspective of what is it like fighting, the first red lightsaber he ever saw in his life.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Especially, what it makes me think of is just how long Anakin has been Vader at the time of this show. My hunch is it's around 2 years, and
I think so. Yeah,
it's kind of a surprise that it's a little bit of a surprise that they had not heard of Vader by now. Right, as much as Maul has been on the run from the Empire, and what this entire story sort of presages is that Vader has not been in service as kind of thug Model 2 for that long. Maybe he's been doing something else, or who knows what he's been doing for the last 2 years. But that is an interesting story to me, that he's been essentially stewing as level up thug for Sidious for 2 years, has not been called out on this adventure.
Well, or the people who he's going after don't live to tell anyone.
Yeah.
Because you have to think right now, most of what he's doing is finding Order 66 survivors and either killing them or recruiting them into the Inquisitorius. And we do know from some of the books that he has been going out and doing that, and some of the Inquisitors certainly know who he is. Mm-hmm. But let's say he tries to go after a Jedi. Who's that Jedi going to tell? Because everybody hates the Jedi right now. So I think he's probably been more active than we think, but I think that he's not appearing on, Galactic News next to Sidious the way I think he is by the time of A New Hope.
Yeah, yeah.
I also think there's probably like an adjustment period, right? I mean, we know Anakin's injuries are extensive, and we know that Vader's suit is like specifically designed to limit him in certain ways that were strategic on the behalf of Sidious. Like, he wanted him to struggle physically in that suit. And so like I'm sure there's also a degree to which it took Anakin / Vader some time to get back to the point where he'd be comfortable going toe to toe with not just some random Jedi, but like, a Sith that Sidious knows firsthand is really competent.
Now,
and isn't speaking of that point specifically, right? Like, if we go back to Rebels, Maul tells Ezra, I'm not going to go up against Vader, right? That is, and this is the setup to that experience. And so I guess the collective question is, how well do you believe that this is the reason Maul says, I'm not going up against Vader again? Is that satisfying?
I imagine there will be another encounter if this show goes forward. I think, like, to go from Maul in the Clone Wars, who was trying to recruit Ahsoka specifically to go kill the Emperor and Anakin, to Maul, who, confronts Darth Vader, is maybe or maybe not aware that that's the same person he was just trying to fight, to Maul in Rebels, who has Ahsoka, who's there, who's ready to fight Anakin, and him being like, no, I'm actually out. I feel like there's got to be a little bit more that goes on there, but we'll see.
I hope so, yeah. I'm sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
Before AKU jumped in, we were talking about how, at least for both of us, it really worked that Vader never speaks. And at least for my part, in part because I'm not really comfortable with the James Earl Jones zombie voice thing that they've talked about doing. if there's a season 2, Vader may be a bigger part of it, and we might have Vader speaking. If nothing else, I'm going to be really curious. How does Vader handle the Inquisitors who failed? And how does Sidious handle Vader who failed? Since, everyone except Docky is still alive. How do you want them to just keep Vader off screen if he's supposed to speak? Do you want them to do AI James Earl Jones? Do we want to do a recast? What do you think would work there?
I feel like, I'm pretty anti-AI, but James Earl Jones did in his life like consent to being used in that kind of way, and so like that I think does make me a little bit more comfortable with the use of it for this particular character, because it is at least like a voice actor who in their life said, yes, I am okay with this. I think a recast would be fine. I honestly think that like with voice modulation technology that we have today, you could find someone with a similar enough voice presence. I mean, Hayden Christensen's voice is different enough from James Earl Jones' voice that you got to be able to find it in between somewhere. And I think keeping his dialogue minimal would be valuable. I am mostly like wondering if we're going to get some sort of conversation between Maul and Vader, because Maul, he says in like not these last 2 episodes, but the episodes before, like, I don't want Sidious to do this to anyone else. Like, I'm not going to let him do this to anyone else. And Vader is literally the next person that Sidious did this to, like, groomed from childhood into this position of like being enslaved in the dark side. And I think a conversation between Maul and Vader would be really interesting, because I think Vader would reject that wholeheartedly. And so like, to that degree, I would like there to be maybe some dialogue, but I think keeping it minimal would probably be my preference, just also because, like, again, we go back to episode 4 Vader, who's kind of reserved, who's kind of quiet, who's out there to, like, give commands, and that's pretty much it.
I can skip over the Rogue One issuing puns as part of threats phase of Vader and just sort of ignore that. Let him just be the hallway guy instead of the choke on your aspirations, Vader. I think I'm with you. I think having it minimal... I think that if we have to have generative AI, the James Earl Jones full consent, full negotiated, pre-recorded for this purpose is the best way to do it. But it still feels like I want to beat down every possible elephant nose. I just don't. I think it's all evil. Like, and it's stealing from people. It's anyway. I don't want to get off onto that tangent, but like, I think, yeah, I'd be much happier if it was, Hayden Christensen with amazing amount of voice modulation or something, or someone else, but just not let James Earl Jones sleep. Like he's done.
Well, there is arguably a bigger swing would be not to have Vader in season 2. I mean, there is plenty of story in this, for Maul and Crimson Dawn, and there's plenty of stuff to do, and maybe this was just the big guest appearance, and they can move on, because Vader will be busy.
Yeah. That's really, and so, you could have the Inquisitors talking about, remember what Vader said, remember Vader killed Crowface because blah, 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 or whatever it is.
Right.
So staying on the dark side of it all, obviously one of the other big things we get, and that again, we kind of knew was coming for a long time, but is what seems to be Devan's fall, and Devan's kind of taking on the role of Maul's apprentice. What do we think? How was that handled?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I don't have a whole lot to say about it, because I think for me, the big question is like what happens next. Like the degree to which this is a satisfying fall is determined by like the extent of the fall and like the direction. But I mean, I think it made a lot of sense. I think, Maul's kind of hand in Docky's death that isn't so much his hand in the death, like he was very clearly sabotaging some things going on there, is really interesting, and I do kind of wonder if Devan's ever going to kind of figure out that that's who Maul is. And so I'm very interested to see Devan negotiate the fact that she has taken up this role and is still probably not trusting Maul wholly, and I think that's a good spot to have her in.
Yeah, I'm always suspicious of these kinds of turns, right? Because how believable is it that she picks up the red lightsaber out of necessity. She is clearly enraged at the death of Daki at the hands of Vader. And how long is that kind of emotional well going to be, fertile for this story?
Right.
Because either they're going to need to make the case that she was just latent evil all along, or she's kind of dumb. And neither one of those is an incredibly satisfying solution. There is, because the show is the Maul show, there is this kind of anti-hero vibe where he appears to have sufficiently convinced her that doing bad for the right reasons is enough of a motivator for a character. And I guess I'm with AK. I think how satisfying that becomes will be how believable it is that she becomes this anti-hero character in season 2. And that's just a really hard narrative path to find yourself on.
I think I'm of two minds. I think there's an extent to which Devan can't be his full-on apprentice for very long, but I think for very different reasons that you guys are talking about. Because, I went back and watched the whole season again because my wife hadn't seen it before and she likes to just watch it all at once. And one thing I was struck by was how many times early she is already chafing at the Jedi codes, and when Daki says, like, we can't steal even when, we're starving, we have to beg instead. He says we rely on the kindness of strangers, which, is it possible to use that phrase without it being a reference to Cat on a Hot Tin Roof? Because I can't see why it would be, but I've never heard the phrase the kindness of strangers without it being that reference. But anyway, putting that aside, but and we don't go into it, it's more subtle, but you can tell when Daki lets her be arrested. And then when she's being taken away and Daki decides to rescue, a couple of random people who, are going to die if this bridge falls. But instead of her, every one of those beats, you can see her kind of feeling like this isn't working. And she talks about how the principles Daki wants to believe in, like 99% of the people who did that got killed and kind of got treated like chumps. So I think that it's a lot more there. And I do think that Maul, I've always thought like Return of the Jedi is one of my favorite movies. And the Emperor's attempts to convert Luke are really dumb. Like, the whole, like, by the way, I'm going to tell you what to do. And if you do it, it will make you mine. Like, it's a good reason not to do it. Vader is much better by pissing him off about his sister. And I feel like Maul actually is the best by just subtly building that anger. And you're right. Like, he doesn't kill Daki. He doesn't come close to, but he gives Daki that little shove that allows Vader to go full on. In which, I don't know if you caught this, but the maneuver Vader uses of like driving him down and then just overhand cut until he can't even raise his arm anymore is the exact same thing Luke does to him which I love that. But yeah, so to me, I think I fully am on board in believing that Devan is exploring the dark side, especially in this area that Maul is able to say of like, I'm not the Emperor. I want to take down the Emperor. To me, this is kind of like what Ezra flirts with in Rebels of, can we use some of the dark side without fully becoming to it? The other hand for me, though, the reason why I think it can't be that like she just full on becomes Darth Talon and is his apprentice for the next 12 years or whatever, is because everything that we see of him in Rebels, when he tries to recruit Ahsoka and then tries to recruit Ezra, he's not saying I need a new apprentice. He's not saying I had a wonderful apprentice for a while. He really is coming from a place of I have never really had a full apprentice. And this is kind of the prequelitis that can happen where it might be that they just try to shove it in. But I feel like what I really hope is that they're going to honor that by having her be, kind of going in that direction, but never really fully. And at the end, there's some kind of a challenge and Maul maybe has to kill her or she gets killed by something else, or, maybe that the two of them take on Vader again or take on even Sidious again and she gets killed or whatever that might be.
Yeah, this is a dance with the devil by the pale moonlight situation. It would not surprise me if this is the wicked trickster trying to set us up to believe that it's Talon, when in fact she is bereaved and furious, and that's why she picks up the red saber in the moment. Those feelings don't last, and she has proven that she is perfectly capable of choosing a third path, and it would not surprise me at all to find a third path.
Yeah.
I think what I think is likely to be the motivator for keeping her with Maul is like pride. I think she thinks she can use Maul more than Maul can use her. And like, I get the sense that that'll be what gets her kind of caught in a situation. The only, like, I'm thinking character wise, like, if they were going to get her to stay as his apprentice for an extended period of time, I'd think it'd have to go something like what Sidious ultimately pulls with Anakin, which is you get them to do something they kind of can't take back. And so they just have to embrace it and move on, right? Like Anakin ultimately, like, you know, helps Sidious kill Mace Windu and then goes, well, I can't go back now. And I'm wondering if there's maybe like a similar sort of setup with Devan where she's going to think she's playing this in between. She'll like kind of think she's using Maul and then do something she can't come back from and go, well, I guess I'm here now. And then that plays out in a different way.
So Aaron actually had a great theory about this when we chatted a couple days ago, because I love a good teenage romance. I love a good Dawson's Creek story. I don't want that in this show. And so the Riley of it all is not what I'm super excited about. And I don't want something where like she's kind of like torn back and forth with Riley representing like the good side of her and all that kind of stuff. But what Aaron pointed out is that if Maul plays it right, her killing Maul, her, you know, helping to kill Mace will be that she has to kill Riley. You know, and I do think that could be a real, like, the challenge moment of does she, and maybe she resists it. She doesn't do it. And that's why she never really becomes the apprentice he wants. I do think, go ahead.
I was going to say, just especially because I think Riley is still in a precarious position in terms of like his allegiance to the Empire, just because of his family ties, right?
Well, I think Two Boots is going to go full Westworld and just tear Riley apart, you know, just a rage-fueled robot bender.
Okay. I was going to say at this point, I feel like the struggle is going to be between Two Boots and Riley's mom, because I don't really get that. To me, the only really sour note in all of this was the Lawson's father. Was Lawson as the sacrificial father plotline. It felt.
Is he really sacrificed? If you don't see a body, he can come back. We've seen this time and time again.
Well, he might have failed to sacrifice, but he certainly attempted, and the son believes he has sacrificed himself.
Yes, that is true.
I agree with you that, like, the show that showed us Maul decapitating numerous people, I don't think is worried about our tender sensibilities in terms of Lawson's body. But it felt so cliched. I've never really cared about the space lacrosse player. I just don't. He doesn't ring true to me. And one thing we really set up with Lawson is that he's so against the Empire, and that part of why he and his wife split was that she was in bed with the Empire. And so him saying at the end of Two Boots, like, get him to his mother, that just rung wrong to me. What do you all think of that? And his whole plot line.
Yeah, I think the tough thing about Lawson is he's set up as this anti-Empire character, but he's still a cop.
Mm-hmm.
Like the contradictions in that character are, I think, just really tough to tease out, because you have like this non-white character who's supposed to be a protagonist, who's anti-Empire, but is still at the end of the day like working for law enforcement, is a cop, sends his son back to the Empire. Like, I just kind of don't know what to do with him. And I'm like, okay, I thought there was maybe going to be some interesting stuff done there in terms of like his full deconstruction away from like, you know, I guess like the Empire as a whole, but also like the system of justice he was working in. But I think you're right. They just went with kind of a cliche option that absolves that discussion from having to happen.
I don't know. I think I'm more bullish on it than you guys. I actually think there's a lot of room for a continued complex conversation about the family's role inside and outside of the Empire, right? I mean, his allegiance to law enforcement was completely separate from his, or I should say, inseparable from his impression of the Empire, that they were the wrong thing about law enforcement. Him sending Riley to his mother is an act of familial loyalty and trust that his mother will do the right thing. I think I actually am not convinced that she's in the part of the Empire that she would even understand is doing bad stuff. Right. I mean, we've seen so many examples across the books of people who are working for the Empire just because they're like gate attendants. Right. They're just trying to get by. They eat their cereal in the morning. They go work in data refinement in the afternoon. I think that's, who knows what role she's actually playing. I don't think it's in a militarized, area. That gives us a chance to have a bigger conversation about her allegiance if, let's just say, the father's dead. Right. Who knows what's going on? I mean, the speaking of elephants in the room, who knows what is left after Riley's interrogation by the Inquisitor, right? That's potentially a ticking time bomb that has not been answered or addressed in the last 2 episodes of the show. So I'm actually fascinated by what could happen, because the show wants to make us think it's the cliched choice, and maybe it's not.
I think that'd be interesting to do, but I think they're already doing that with another character, and that's Two Boots. Like, Two Boots to me is the one who's having the, we trust the, like, to me, Two Boots is the, a young black man is having a problem. We'll call the cops. What's wrong with that? He just doesn't get the issue there. And by the end, he's discovered the leopards will eat the faces of his friends. And he's had a real conversion moment there. And so I think we're already getting with him that story of the person who just doesn't notice the problems of the Empire, but now has had them in his face. With the mother, I think the fact that Riley contacted her and said, like, Dad's been imprisoned and they're doing these terrible things, and her response was, no, it's fine. I'm sure the Empire is good. Don't worry about it.
Right.
It's not that it cuts that off. I think it could become the story you're talking about, but I think I would be a little disappointed by that. I think, like, they had the chance to start down that road and they didn't. And maybe they will, but I just, like, if it's so, I just don't think I feel like we got that story in Andor. We got that story with Two Boots. I'm not sure that's a story we need to get again, especially when and maybe you are more, I just have not found any reason to be invested in Riley.
Well, I'm with you in Camp Dawson. I feel like I didn't need the Dawson character from his perspective. I don't necessarily mind the character when I think about it from the father's perspective, because that is a different story than one we've had. I don't need Riley to have his own B or C story in season 2. I could be done with that, but I do kind of like, again, from the mother's perspective, what does it look like to grieve the loss of your ex-husband at the hands of the people that you work for, right? And again, I'll say it again, I love the tropes when they're played well. I don't mind having that conversation again on this show if it's done in an interesting way. I like it when Darth Vader lights up his red lightsaber in the dark. That's going to keep happening. This is the same tool done narratively, and it's new. It's something that started with sort of Andor, playing the sort of family heartstrings in a different way, bringing that aesthetic from some of the authorial reaches in the books. And I think that they're really playing with those things for us in a different media, and I'm here for it.
That's fair. And I will say there's one way I would like the romance plot line to go forward, which is that if it does, I don't want it to be something in opposition to what she's doing with Maul. Because one thing I've always thought was kind of weird, but makes sense given the people who are telling these stories, the people they thought they were telling the stories to, especially in like the Legends canon books and stuff like that, but also in the regular stories. One of the ideas is, the first line of the Sith code is peace is a lie, there is only passion. The Sith are supposed to be people ruled by their passions. And part of that should mean you're allowed to get attached to people the way the Jedi don't. And yet most of the Sith that we've seen are basically celibate.
Right.
Like Palpatine never has any romance.
Right.
Anakin is kind of off the market in the big suit thing, although some people are into what they're into, and that's fine. Maul never had any romance. I think that could be an interesting way of Maul kind of catching Devan being like, well, I have feelings for Riley, but I don't know what to do with them because I'm not supposed to have attachment. And Maul being like, no, passion, live into your passions. And then, but also being like, but if he becomes a weakness of yours, then you kill him. And something like that.
Can you imagine, though, how jarring that would be on this show because of the aesthetic that we've had from the Sith so far in all television and big screen implementations? There is none of what you're talking about. Zero, zilch, bupkis. We have never heard that. That would be so jarring for Maul to say, go get some, you get yours. That would be awesome. And what?
Pete, I am saying this with the most love ever, but I know that you've seen The Acolyte. And so this feels like the best confirmation that you were a straight man that I've ever heard in my life.
You're right. No, I had.
Because there's so much thirst. And
yeah, I know. There's a lot of thirst in The Acolyte. Yeah, you're right. Maybe the High Republic was exactly where we need to get for people to just, get busy.
I'm just saying, like, AK, back me up here. Are we?
Yeah, no, and I think like my conception of the Sith in the Old Republic has always been like a hedonistic Sith, right? Like if you go even further back, like before the Rule of Two, I think the Rule of Two is kind of where the Sith are like, we need to get down to business. Our passions need to take a back seat to the mission, right? But I when I think of like the Sith of the Old Republic, I'm very much thinking of Sith who are probably just like everybody in the Sith, academy, the Sith temple is slept with everybody because that's like they're literally just they're
like based on Caligula's Rome, right? Like
yeah, like
well, and I do think, and here we have to wrestle with something, and that the Darth Talon figure that Devan may grow into has this problem too. You're completely right, AK, but also a lot of that was written very much by what seemed like teenage boys, and we're actually adult men, but writing mostly for teenage boys. And like, I love how some of that hedonism is portrayed, but it's also every woman in that world is a femme fatale of the like take Asajj Ventress with the stab you with a lightsaber, pull you in for a kiss. It's all of that. So, and I think Darth Talon, like part of why some groups are excited to see Darth Talon, I think she's a great character in many ways. If you cosplay the Darth Talon that's appeared in a lot of the art, it's not a family-friendly outfit. Let's put it that way. And so, yeah, I think they've kind of been I think part of why they haven't gone into that is because a lot of it's written in very sexist ways. They may just decide not to touch it because I don't want, certainly she wouldn't be Darth if she's with Maul. I don't want Talon in any like that kind of an outfit, especially because I think she's a teenager. But I do think they could at least play with it, make it more like a PG-13 version. I do think Maul would be like, yeah, like this is, if you have your passions, chase your passions, not, go ride them off into the sunset or whatever.
Yeah, I wonder how they would get Maul to that point because he is so kind of single-minded. Like if we think about, going back to the Ahab of it all, like he does have a mission that he doesn't really want to be distracted from. And I'm wondering where like the distraction from his vengeance, the distraction from his, his goal would complicate his willingness to tell Devan to go like spend time doing something else. And I think like that's a problem that I run in because, I would much rather, like, I would love to see Maul get into some sort of romantic entanglement somewhere and have to deal with that. And that's like not where we're going, because if Devan goes that direction, I think there's going to be an internal tension between, like, there's almost has to be a tension between the romance and what she's doing with Maul, where I think you're right. It would be much more interesting if that tension wasn't there. But because of the stakes we've set up, and like the fact that they're on the run and the fact that Maul has these explicit goals in mind, I think make that difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. As the one person who's been a parent of teenagers, I can understand, Pete, if this takes you in a very different direction.
My kids are grown. I get to this gets to become a playground again. I think that I think you're right. All I'm spinning on is the fact that I totally missed the Old Republic stuff. My rant about sexy Star Wars times. And I do think that, but I still think that would be a bold expression for the mainline story here. And I also can't, as much as I think I've said I wonder if, I can't quite see how Devan becomes the Talon, the iconic Talon that comes out of the other properties. She does not look anything like she needs to look. What is it that takes her to a complete change of skin?
Right. Yeah, I don't think we're going.
Well, and I'm wondering. Yeah, well, I was thinking, like, what I was thinking is the way we would get there would be the kind of dramatic shift that happens with Maul, right? Because Maul goes from this kind of reserved, kind of quiet, kind of dog character, has his body cut in half, goes through like an existential force level crazy. Or like, the Clone Wars had the Mortis arc, right? What would have happened to Anakin's character had he come out of that with the memory of what he saw, right? And so I think like there are things that the Star Wars universe has at its disposal to really make a character undergo something so incomprehensible that they lose their mind and they become deranged and they fall into this like complete dark side. But I don't we've seen that before.
It seems like the easiest
and I don't
path.
know if that's what they're planning to do. Right. Yeah.
I mean, certainly eyes turn color when you become more Sith. And so Twi'lek's Sith, becoming, although again, they're not Sith is part of the point.
Right.
And yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. I think also there may well be a time jump that the next season of Maul may take place 5 years down the line when Talon is solidly as an adult. And because to me, I've always thought one of the things that's so interesting about Maul and his plot line with his brother, Savage Opress, I think shows this best, but it comes through a bunch of times, including in this, is he, and I will say I'm projecting maybe somewhat because my father was not great to me, although he was definitely not Palpatine levels of not great. But there's a struggle that happens when, you had a parent who was terrible to you, and now you're trying to be a parent yourself. And that's true also, like if your parents are terrible to each other, that's the model of romantic love that if one of your parents is abusive to you, that's the model of parental love He became deeply abusive to Savage when he was Savage's master, because that's the model he was taught. Mm-hmm. And I think he somewhat learned a lesson from that with Savage, but I'll be curious to see like how is that playing out with Devan? How is that playing out with Devan? Is he falling into some of the same patterns of what he learned from Sidious? Or is he, doing something totally different?
Can we talk about Dryden Voss and Solo?
It's my other sour note in a otherwise very good thing, but yeah.
I wanted to offer you an opportunity to air your grievances because I had a feeling as I was watching it last night that this might be an area of contention.
I'll let AK you go first.
Yeah, I honestly I don't even know that I fully put that together when it showed up. Solo is so far from my brain in a lot of ways in terms of where I situate it within the rest of Star Wars continuity. I guess I'm okay, well, this is here. We'll see how this goes. That's kind of my take from it because I was oh, I forgot this was there.
Yeah, it was out of the blue in Solo, right? It was a complete new idea I had never considered. I didn't hate it, and controversial hot take, I actually kind of liked Solo. I thought it was a pretty good movie. I had a good time with it. And
I think so.
Yeah, and to be clear, I like Solo too. It's just it's not one that I remember is in the continuity for some reason.
That to me, Solo is a fantastic standalone heist movie that just happens to have characters named similar to a movie I like. Because although I do think he's a fantastic Lando Calrissian, to me, granted, I haven't seen Solo in a while because it's not one of my favorites, but I do have a pretty good memory of that scene, and it definitely, it feels like Maul was the one. My memory of it is that at that point, Dryden is kind of reporting to Maul, and that's why Kira kind of now becomes the one to report to Maul. And I feel like the only reason you actually bring Dryden Voss into it is if you're going to get Paul Bettany to voice him. And they didn't. And they got someone who did a pretty good Paul Bettany impersonation that it took 3 sentences before I could put together, no, this is not Paul Bettany, but it wasn't. And prequels are always hard because people have plot armor. And so at that ending, we knew that Maul wasn't going to die, but we didn't really know if anybody else was going to live. I think even Merrick, because he could just become, Green Gas Ghost Man when he shows up later. And so introducing another person who has to live, I thought was a real mistake. Especially if the only reason to do Dryden is if you're going to have, it could just be someone talks to Dryden, and now this is Dryden's lieutenant who's come to get him. Because then you're not worrying about why is this voice wrong, and you also aren't having this guy has plot armor as well.
I'll say it took me, as many times as they've dipped into Dryden Voss in this show, it was really up to the very end that I caught, oh God, that's the Paul Bettany Dryden Voss. Oh my God, how did I not see that coming? And then I found I kind of liked it, you guys. I really kind of liked it. I liked the idea that they set up a deal in this show, and the cliffhanger is the only one who doesn't know that Dryden Voss is not going to get what he wants out of this exchange is Dryden Voss. And we know, plot armor specifics indicate, we know how that's going to end. And I have to say, I was kind of happy with the choice. I thought that gives me something to look forward to, because it's now not the what I need to worry about, it's the how. And sometimes the how is exactly what I need to just sort of, ruminate on.
Like I said, I think if they had just gotten Dryden Voss lieutenant and said, this is how Maul plugs into Crimson Dawn and starts whatever he's doing with Voss, I'd be there for that. And if as I imagine, a lot of season 2 is going to be him jockeying with Voss, I would love if Kira comes into the mix somehow and we get to see more of her. I'd also love it if we get Voss. But if so, I really want those actors to come back as voice actors. And we know Paul Bettany has done voice acting. All of Jarvis was pure voice acting.
Right. Yeah, I'm here for it. I think I actually think he's an interesting part of this character, and that's what takes me back to a season without Vader. I think it is the Crimson Dawn season. Let us see exactly how threatening the Crimson Dawn can be. That is a story I am here for. Unleash the crime syndicate in a way that we have not seen before. I'm fascinated by that, right? I want to see the Heat version of this. I want to see, the Scorsese version of Crimson Dawn animated in this style. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I would also love to see Crimson Dawn, and the question I was asking myself was, well, if Vader and Palpatine now know that Maul's still out there up to stuff, how is it going to be the case that whatever crime organization he's working with, when we talk about debate policy, we often say it's there's this double bind between you're doing something big enough that it gets the state attention, but then if it gets the state's attention, you're going to get crushed. And so where is the in between that they're going to have to exist where this is a scary crime syndicate, but it's not a scary enough crime syndicate that it's going to draw a bunch of the Empire's attention and get squished. And how they're going to navigate that, I think will be really interesting, because I wonder if they're just going to go somewhere in the galaxy that is, not a place the Emperor cares about, or if they're gonna like strike some back deal with the Empire. I don't know.
Oh, here's another possibility.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm thinking just of all the various properties that we could tie into. Maul obviously has a deep connection with the Night Sisters. You know, him being a Night Brother and all that, and we also know that Merrick is going to eventually wind up with the Night Sisters. And we don't know anything about what happens with the Night Sisters in between their being wiped out in the Clone Wars and then them showing up as like ghosts in Rebels and in Jedi Fallen Order. But then we get them in the Ahsoka show.
Well, there's also the Tales of the Empire. We get that arc with Morgan Elsbeth.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Who is working with Thrawn. And so, like, I'm wondering if there's a connection somewhere in there between, like, a tension with Dathomirians or Night Sisters who are kind of working with the Empire and Dathomirians or Night Sisters who are kind of working outside the Empire.
Yeah, well, and especially because Maul has clearly like the legs that Mother Talzin created for him have been pretty badly damaged. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's not something I'm going to hang my hat on, but I think there's a lot of possibilities of Dark Sisters showing up.
That wouldn't be the worst thing.
I love them. I'm always for.
Are we?
I think it would allow them to introduce some of Talon's aesthetic too.
True.
If Devan gets in with the Night Sisters a little bit.
Are we pouring one out for Spybot?
Oh, that was so sad.
Yes, I love Spybot. That's so sad.
And that really is done. They hung a flag on that I mean, we saw everything, like we saw a body essentially. Spybot was dissolved in the acid. I don't think we're going to get another Spybot.
And I admit Spybot was getting on my nerves a bit by the end. Like I felt like he was kind of played out, and so when they made his death something I cared about in a way I didn't think they would be able to, but also I was like, I'm ready to be done with Spybot. So I thought that was very well done. Well, this has been about an hour. Any other kind of last things either of you want to bring up that we haven't touched on, or questions you want to pose? Or,
you know, I feel like this show has been in some serious, like, high-rated Star Wars series territory for me. I did not expect it to be as kind of meaningful, but it's up there with Clone Wars for, you know, what Clone Wars was able to accomplish. I am as eager for season 2 as I was, you know, for last season of Clone Wars stuff. I'm really excited to see what they do. It seems like they're having a lot of fun, and the art is beautiful. The characters, even Dawson, I can put up with Dawson. And the characters are really rich. I think this is it's fun. The Kremlinology too, with you both, of figuring out where is this going to pull from, you know, from the lore to make this a continued fantastic show. I'm here for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also excited. I'm having a lot of fun with, like, you know, Maul's personal philosophy and like his, you know, tensions between where he's situated with the dark side and what that means in the world where he knows the Empire is evil. And I also have just liked, like, the, you know, the crime syndicate situation. Like, I really enjoyed Vario this whole season, just like as a character. I want more, you know, who are people who are doing things in the background of the galaxy that's making people's life hard, who aren't the Empire. I've been having fun with that, and so I'm excited for what this show is going to do. And I do think the art for this show is pretty top tier. I think they've really nailed the Clone Wars animation style, but in a really kind of crisp, fresh way. It's just gorgeous to look at, and so I'm super excited about more of it.
We were saying before we start recording, and I'm going to make sure I'm going to do one last session with Aaron and Alex about this show, and I'm going to make sure we talk about lightsabers in the mist, because we'd never done, but it's everything. Like, one of my favorite shots was when we were focusing on Lawson and what he was doing, and just in the background were these red and blue lights flashing of the lightsabers. For me, though, the final comment, and I'll let you guys respond and then bring this to a close. Pete, you said that, they're kind of putting Maul and maybe Devan into the anti-hero category. And I would actually say part of why I was really impressed by the show is I don't think it did that. I think it let Maul stay a villain. He is fighting against someone who we think should be fought against, but he is far beyond even the Punisher or someone like that in terms of using methods I think we're supposed to be like, this is not cool, this is not okay. And if he makes Devan fall, like, she's going to become more powerful, but I think it's going to be something we look at as bad. And I think it is very hard for a show to have a villain as its protagonist. And I think they did a really good job of making him deeply sympathetic, deeply relatable, someone who you're kind of rooting for, even though you hate it or don't hate it, but still like not being like, oh, but he's fighting the Emperor, so it's okay. He's had there has been no redemption arc whatsoever for him, and I don't want there to be. And I think that's incredible storytelling.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that I have a struggle with a lot of times in narratives that are working within a structure of fascism is this kind of like willingness to justify, kind of abysmal actions in the name of like fighting evil. And I think Maul, to the counter, is an example of like, no, there actually is such a thing as going too far. Like, for just fighting evil is not sufficient. You have to be fighting for something good. Like, just being out for revenge, just being out to get like your own piece of something is not actually the resistance to fascism that you think it is. It's just selfishness. It's just evil. And I really enjoy that they have nailed that down pretty clearly. And I like it.
I don't know. I mean, I think the final two episodes do an able job of building sympathy, which, especially in his flashbacks and reflections of his youth and abuse and abandonment and those sorts of images that, while may not in practice make him an anti-hero, doing bad things for the cause of good, it certainly has all the trappings of a character of that particular gestalt. And I think that's kind of important to keep people watching the show, because if he continues to be just bad, then we don't get a chance to explore the complexity of him as an organism. And that's more interesting to me. Not just he's always bad, but why is he doing that stuff? I think this show is making the case that he's not just selfish, and that makes me more curious than ever about this character.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of I feel like there's the middle ground there of what you two are saying, because to me it's that, I don't think that it's that he's always evil. I think it's that stepping away from evil and showing the moral complexity of evil doesn't have to mean that now all of a sudden you're good. That there is that's to me the thing. And I think here's where we pour one out for Spybot. I want to pour one out for Rook Cast, because I think that's you're right. In those last episodes, they're making him more and more kind of heroic, but then showing that all the people who followed him, believing him, that once he gets Devan, he doesn't care about them anymore, and he happily consigns them to their death. And he feels more about Spybot than he does for any of the rest of them, which Spybot's kind of cool, but also like a couple of them were his own, were his Night brothers in some way. And
Spybot was his puppy.
Spybot was his child. And I think he made Spybot. Yeah. So Spybot is to him as R2 is to Anakin and then Luke.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that we're having this discussion is the brilliance, is that he's not the villain. We're not rooting for someone to take him down, but he's also not on a redemption arc, I guess, is more than my point. Like, to me, to be an anti-hero, you have to have not even some kind of redemption arc, but some kind of level of like, you've switched sides and now he doesn't switch sides to help the good guys. He convinces the good guys that they should work with him.
Yes, this is an enemy of my enemy story, much more than a redemption arc. But again, the trappings make it look very similar. It is certainly cosplaying as an anti-hero story.
Well, and he said it so well in episode 2. You are operating under the premise that I am the villain here, but things are not so simple as good and evil. To me, that's the mission statement of the season.
That's the whole thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been fantastic. Each of you, where can people find you?
You can find me at truestory.fm. That's where I do a lot of podcasting. I'm at Pete Wright on, socials, wherever it matters.
TrueStory.fm is where you can find about 95% of the important work that Pete does. But if you go to Amazon or your local bookstore online seller, you can find Lattice, the new novella sci-fi that I've about halfway through and really enjoying by Mr. Pete Wright. So definitely check that out as well. AK.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Iron Kingdom Adventures, and I post stuff there from time to time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. Of course, please check out Superhero Ethics. We're doing a lot of fun things. Check out Marvel Movie Minute, where Pete and I are talking about a Marvel movie that I actually enjoy, which I am 1 for 4 now in the movies that they've gotten me to come on to. So, although I did wind up enjoying Thor, the first one, a lot more. The second, not so much.
Don't paint yourself as the anti-hero of that podcast, Matthew.
No, I'm the Maul. I'm the villain. I'm still nitpicking things, but at least we're finding some good roots. So please check all that out. All that is on TrueStory.fm or theethicalpanda.com or Pete Wright. Is it Pete Wrights?
No, actually my personal website is itsmepete.com.
Okay.
You can find everything there.
Because you're a writer and your last name is Wright, and I think there's something to be
It's kind of a
there.
curse. Yeah.
Well, curse or blessing?
Yeah.
You tell us. Anyway, folks, thank you so much. We have spoken.